For me, after my research, I realized that chutzpah isn't a single word. Rather, it's a combination of skills, behaviors, or characteristics that combine to create a skill set. And getting to what you said about a moral compass, a skill set can be used in almost all cases for positive purposes or negative purposes. For example, you're a coder. If I was a coder, two of us might go to the same classes, graduate with honors. You might decide to use your skills to create applications for businesses, to make businesses run more efficiently, to get a manufacturing facility up and running in a way that makes more sense. So your coding helps people. I might take a very easy way out and say, with this, I can break into people's computers. I can create ransomware.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who do that too.
Right. So the skill set of coding isn't good or bad by itself. It's the moral compass of the person who's using it. Same with a locksmith. I can learn locksmithing and open a shop and help people when they have problems because they've forgotten their keys, a lock is jammed or broken, whatever. Or I can use that to break into people's homes.
Yeah.
Because I now have that knowledge, that skill set. So chutzpah, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about it, in my world is 8 key behaviors and characteristics. There might be more synonyms that I don't cover, but I consider them to underlie all of this. So for example, people have said, do you consider courage as part of chutzpah? And I say, yes, although I don't discuss it as part of those 8 key behaviors and characteristics, for the simple reason that courage underlies all of this. You can't do any of it if you don't have at least a bit of courage.
Yeah, I think the courage is a big part though, because most people aren't really willing to take that leap. And I was actually kind of curious about, you mentioned the example of coders, right? How one coder can be doing something very fantastic, one can be doing something very, like, it's negative in a way. What determines that separation between the two? Like, is it genetic? Is it like a nature versus nurture type of conversation? What determines what path they will take?
Well, let me give you a story. 2 businesses in New York City. These are actual businesses. The first was founded by a very enterprising young man. He did not grow up in the best neighborhood in New York. Matter of fact, his education was pretty poor. Frankly, he was street educated, which can provide a tremendous amount of value growing up in a very crowded city where people don't always respect the rights of others. He was working since his early teens. By the time he was, I think it was 18 or 19, he was clearing $2 million a year.
Wow.
Yes.
For 19? That's
Yes.
like 0.001% type stuff.
Now, the problem is he was a drug dealer.
Oh.
He learned drug dealing on the street.
Yeah.
And he realized, there's a better way to do this.
You can apply that to somewhere so much better. Like, he can become a very successful business person.
He did, and he realized that there are issues with the idea that customers come to a destination, a street corner, a phone booth, because at the time people were operating out of phone booths, public phone booths. I don't know if anybody in your generation knows what I'm talking about. Okay.
I've seen them before. I've seen them before.
So, but the thing is, they'd come to a street corner, and the transaction would be held there. He said, "Well, this is kind of crazy." It puts me in touch with a lot of customers who I really don't want to deal with or be face to face with. And it makes it so easy for police surveillance to basically capture all of us on video and have the evidence they need for a trial. So he decided he was going to create a business that provides a delivery service. And his target market was going to be white collar users.
Yeah. Oh, white collar. Yeah.
And it worked out well, because they could send the text, have somebody meet them elsewhere or even at their apartment or even their place of work in some cases, exchange the money and the drugs and be on their way. And they were less likely to get into a dispute as to, hey, last time you shorted me, I'm taking more. You didn't have the types of problems that the typical drug dealers were having. Now, the sad side to this is at 19, one of his guys was basically apprehended by the police and turned on him. I'm not saying this part is sad, because there is a justice system in this country. And when you break the law in that way, you should count on at some
Yeah.
point or another paying your dues.
Yeah.
He was sentenced to 7 years in jail.
Okay.
He had just had a child, a son.
Oh my God. 4?
And he told himself that he would do anything he needed to survive in jail because he would come out and be a good father to his son.
Mhm.
Okay. So he had a purpose when he went in. The other thing that's interesting is that he was about 70 pounds overweight when he went into prison.
So I'm assuming he got crazy to shape when he went there.
Yeah. And the doctor told him that's going to be your biggest threat to survival. Let's move on now for a moment to the second business. Second business, if we think about health clubs and the health club industry in this country, do you belong to a health club or do you use the facilities at your school?
I don't, but I go to Equinox, so I use
Okay,
those.
so you go to Equinox.
Yeah.
So Equinox, LA Fitness, we can probably name half a dozen of the major providers, Orange Theory, Soul Cycle, that have raised large amounts of money, of capital to build and expand their businesses around the country. Well, this business person decided, I have a unique way of training people. It's proven. I think I can do a really good job. So he did. He opened up a single location. And instead of being squashed immediately by the competition, whose ability to use whose ability to use the funds they had access to for marketing, for equipment, for beautiful facilities that were constantly being upgraded. He didn't have any of that. And yet he created a successful single location business. So I
Mhm.
think to myself, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm writing a book. Boy, I'd love to go to New York and speak with this guy
Yeah,
who
definitely.
built the gym. The guy who built the drug dealership,
Yeah.
the drug dealing business, not so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know that I'd want to be across the table.
Yeah,
Who
probably not
knows?
best friends with him.
Right. So that was my thought. But then the real interesting thing is it's the same guy.
Oh
And
wow.
he got out of prison. Well, I remember I said he was 70 pounds overweight when he went in.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
When in isolation, he didn't have access to weights or anything beyond his own body weight, the steel bunk, the steel toilet, the steel sink. And he created an exercise program for himself
That's ingenious. Yeah.
and diligently did it every day because there was very little else that he could do anyway.
Yeah.
And by the time he got out and went back into I guess, the main prison area, he was a different person. And people looked at him and said, the hell happened to you? Can you show me how I can get into that type of shape? So he started training other inmates. Good behavior and some good fortune. He served his time. He got out.
Mhm.
And again, his purpose was to get back to his son. He wanted to go legit. And it's very difficult for felons upon leaving prison to get legit jobs. There are few employers who are willing to try them. There's always some fear that what kind of liability do I have if something happens between this employee and another employee or this
Definitely.
employee and a customer. So, unable to get a job, he used the same skills he used to create his first business. He thought to himself, well, maybe I should open a gym, but he couldn't because nobody would lend him money. So he said, well, how can I give lessons in the parks around here? So he created business cards and he went after what he called his target market. So this gets into marketing.
Yeah.
Most likely person to respond to what I'm offering. And he decided they were women in yoga pants that he'd see on the street.
I was gonna say the same exact thing. The same exact thing. Those are the type of people who would pay for those type of courses.
So he would give them the cards and he would have regular class times in a park. Park didn't cost him anything, and people would pay $6 or $8 or $10 or maybe more to be in the class. Some people, of course, hung out on the fringes and then ran away before they could pay. But on the whole, he made enough money at this and created a business that he decided once again to pursue opening a gym.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You should make like is that I hate to make like $1,000 off of that or more.
depending on how many people he got, but also this is a person who's persistent, who's bright, who is creative,
Yeah.
and thought that, look, there are all sorts of obstacles. It's so easy for me to end back up in prison, but I'm not going there. So what can I do? How many hours? I don't care what it takes. I'm going to be here for my son. Right? So he ends up finding that there's now a program from lenders who are willing to work with ex-felons
Mhm.
and open a
Oh,
business.
I see it. Yeah.
He used that money to open the location, which coincidentally happened to have been on the same block where he first started dealing drugs. Now, this
Going
guy's
full
in New York.
circle.
Yeah. The name of his company is Con, as in C-O-N, Body. He has a TED Talk, a website, it's a book. It's really a fascinating story. But now let's get back to your original question. Why do some people use it for constructive purposes or good purposes? Others use it for bad purposes. The same skill set. All he knew in terms of, well, I'm good at speaking to people, at thinking outside the box, at hustling, at overcoming obstacles, about thinking how to solve problems. I'll be perfect in this drug dealing business, because he really didn't have the opportunity to get
Yeah.
hired, right? He was doing this in middle school and high school. He didn't really have the
The
opportunity.
opportunity was it like did all he know was all like did all he know was drugs? Was that like all he knew? Like was that he was surrounded by that for so long and so often that his mind instantly went to that business model. But do you think it would have been a different story if he grew up somewhere else and had those same skills? If he grew up around let's say a community of gym goers, would that have been like his what his chutzpah
I
gone better?
believe, yes, I believe 100%. He developed as a child or growing up. He learned how to make decisions. He learned how to think one or two or even three steps ahead. Had he not been in that circumstance, surrounded by other poverty, neglect, poor education system,
Yeah.
who knows how he would have gone. Now, people say, okay, so you've got the guy who started out bad and became good, and he had chutzpah, and I see where it worked in both situations. Has it happened in reverse? So, in the news right now, or very recently, and actually for the last couple of years, Elizabeth Holmes is no longer living at home. Now, a lot of people in your audience is probably going to be thinking Elizabeth Holmes. That name is so familiar.
Yeah, she's seriously familiar. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I know her, but I don't know her.
Okay, Elizabeth Holmes started a company called Theranos.
Oh my, wait, is this the person who did that fake like treatment thing that would take your DNA or something like that and give you a fake result?
Yes,
Did
she
she
was
did she have like a fake deep voice too or something? She faked a deep voice for like her whole career.
that I couldn't say, but
That's
basically
crazy. That's
a
I completely
bright,
forgot she existed.
bright Ivy League student who had the education. Now, when she started her business, when co-founded it with some others, uh, she had a great idea, a blood test that would be quicker and diagnose more blood type diseases or issues way more quickly and cheaply than the current technology. That was the business plan. That's what they pursued, set out to do, but they could never get it to work as well as what was out there. But at this point, they'd raised a lot of money. And they
Mm,
also had signed
pressure was building.
contracts with major distributors, retail distributors around the country to set up blood testing centers for Theranos
Mhm.
and send the blood away. They were actually taking samples, getting
Well, they
samples.
were actually they were like doing the actual samples. It wasn't just like a
Yeah,
yeah, we're thinking like actual customers too, and that's what the big problem arises because these customers think they're getting this crazy treatment, but it's just a bunch of bullshit. Is
yeah, they thought that, oh, I'm going to get a diagnosis. So what was happening is they were misdiagnosing.
oh my
They
god,
were defrauding investors. Um, I can't tell you what happened to any of the patients, but I can imagine that with a great number of them, something bad happened to some of
yeah,
these patients somewhere,
getting
sadly.
misdiagnosis. That's
Right.
crazy to do to your patients. That's
Okay.
crazy.
So again, somebody with the skill set that started with the intention of, I'm going to do a groundbreaking, differentiating technology that is going to provide so much value to the world. But when they ran across a significant obstacle, instead of saying, we're going to have to put the brakes on this, we're going to have to be honest with our board of directors and our customers that our development has slowed. We no longer have that time frame. We wish we did, but we can't proceed because the technology just isn't there yet. That was one option.
Yeah.
And they probably would have lost their jobs and their seats and their high salaries. And of course, the $9 billion valuation for the company would have dropped to $1 billion, but she wouldn't be serving an 11-year sentence in jail now.
Yeah.
So the idea that you do what you know, and that creates the ethical side, these stories, I would argue, would say, no, that's not the case. Because the person who grew up surrounded by poverty and a lack of opportunity started in potentially the business that he knew, because he was hired to run drugs as a young kid. Who was going to stop the 12-year-old, for example?
Yeah.
His name, by the way, is Cos Marte. So for any of our audience that's curious, Cos Marte, Google him, Google Con Body, fascinating story. It has nothing to do from his perspective with chutzpah. But when I heard the story, I realized what a great illustration of how this is really a skill set that can be used for constructive or destructive purposes.
Yeah.
And the Theranos story is one that shows the other side. Another example, you're familiar with Bernie Madoff since you're in finance?
A bit, yeah.
Okay, so Bernie Madoff ran the largest Ponzi scheme known to man.
Yeah, I could have sworn he was a big scammer. That was like the biggest thing about him.
Well, because we focus on the end of his story, $65 billion raised under false pretenses.
I just don't get how these people get away with it for so long, especially with Elizabeth Holmes, for example. Some of these people must have been like, "This is so fishy." They're saying I have this when I obviously have this. Like, I just wonder how this goes unnoticed. But I guess that's besides the point.
Well, the other question people have said is, why did people keep investing in him?
Yeah, why do people keep going with it if they knew it was obviously something going wrong?
Because people may have suspected, but when other people had a 3 or 4 or 5% return, he had a guaranteed 10% return. Month after month after month, the statements he sent his clients showed an increase in their value, funds they invest, of 10%. Now, a Ponzi scheme, basically the definition of that is that I raise money from you and 100 of your friends, and I promise you a certain return or above average return. Well, how am I going to get that to you? Well, the last 50 people in that 100, since I'm raising that money after I've gotten the first 10, 20, 30 people, I'm going to use the money I have from them, take a small piece of that to pay the return I promised you. You're probably not going to pull your money out because you see your account growing.
Yeah.
So as long as he's able to find other people saying, well, he's proven. I mean, he had a very high position in Wall Street. Now, the interesting thing there is when he started his first company, it was completely legit. It's when he hit obstacles related to changes and the rules and regulations and how penny stocks would be traded and priced, his margin took a big drop. And he was never able to replace it. Over time, that grew to, well, why don't I pay these customers? I'll get this under control sooner or later. But for now, I'll pay these customers a return based on the money that I'm getting from new investors. Well, by definition, at some time, a Ponzi scheme can no longer bring new investors in, and the whole thing falls apart.